You've accepted an offer on your house. The number looks good. The buyers seem serious. You're already mentally spending that money and planning your next move. And then the inspection report comes back. And suddenly it feels like someone handed you a list of everything you never fixed and every shortcut you ever took in that house. The deal starts to wobble. The buyers want $18,000 off the price. Or they want you to fix everything before closing. Or worse, they just walk away entirely. And you're sitting there wondering how a house you lived in just fine for 12 years suddenly turned into a liability overnight. If that scenario sounds familiar, or if you're getting ready to sell and you want to avoid it completely, hit subscribe before we dive in, because this one is going to save you real money. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've been in the construction and renovation business long enough to have walked through hundreds of homes right before they went on the market. I've seen deals fall apart over things that would have cost a few $100s to fix 6 months earlier. I've seen sellers lose thousands in negotiated credits over problems they didn't even know existed. And I've also seen sellers who prepped smart, handled the right things ahead of time, and closed without a single headache. The difference between those two outcomes usually comes down to knowing what inspectors actually look for, what buyers actually get scared by, and what problems have the power to completely derail a transaction. That's exactly what we're going over today. 10 inspection problems that can kill your home sale, ranked by how much damage they actually cause. Let's start with the big one: roof problems. I don't care how nice your kitchen looks or how recently you painted the interior. If that inspector gets up on the roof and starts flagging missing shingles, damaged flashing, granule loss on an aging surface, or soft spots that suggest the decking underneath is compromised, you are in for a painful conversation. Buyers are scared of roofs, and they should be, because a full roof replacement on an average house runs anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000, depending on size, pitch, and material. When buyers see roof issues, they don't think, "Oh, we'll handle that." They think, "What else is wrong with this house that we can't see?" It triggers a trust problem that goes beyond the roof itself. Here's what I always tell sellers: get your roof looked at before you list, not by your neighbor, by an actual roofer. Spend $300 to $500 on a professional inspection and minor repairs. Replace damaged flashing around chimneys and vents. Address any soft spots. It is always cheaper to fix it on your terms than to negotiate it out of your sale price under pressure. Next up, foundation cracks. Now, look, not every crack in a foundation wall means the house is sinking into the earth. Some cracks are cosmetic. Hairline vertical cracks in poured concrete are often just normal settling and shrinkage. But horizontal cracks in a block foundation, stair-step cracks in brick or block, cracks with displacement, meaning one side is higher than the other, that's a different conversation entirely. And buyers know the difference because their inspector is going to explain it to them in the report. Foundation concerns scare buyers more than almost anything else, because the fixes can range from cheap to catastrophically expensive, depending on what's actually happening. If you have visible cracks, get a structural engineer to look at them before you list. A legitimate engineer's letter saying these cracks are cosmetic and do not indicate structural movement is worth its weight in gold during a sale. It costs a few $100s, and it can prevent thousands in negotiations. Let me talk about electrical panels, because this one comes up constantly, and it's one of those issues that can actually cause a sale to fall apart at the financing stage, not just the negotiation stage. Certain panel brands have a history of known defects. If you've got a Federal Pacific panel or a Zinsco panel in your house, many buyers' lenders will not finance the purchase without the panel being replaced first. I've seen deals die specifically because the sellers didn't want to replace a panel and the buyer's lender wouldn't budge. A panel replacement typically runs $1,500 to $3,000, depending on your market. That stings, but losing a deal and relisting costs you more in carrying costs, market time, and negotiating position. Other electrical red flags inspectors flag include double-tapped breakers, ungrounded outlets, missing GFCI protection in bathrooms, kitchens, and garages, and DIY wiring that doesn't meet code. These aren't just negotiating points. Some of them are safety issues that sophisticated buyers will walk away from. Here's what no one tells you about HVAC systems. Age matters almost as much as condition. An inspector will note the age of your furnace and your air conditioning unit. Buyers and their agents know what the expected lifespan of those systems is. A 22-year-old furnace that's technically still running is still going to show up in the inspection report as being well past its expected service life, and buyers are going to use that to negotiate. The same goes for a central AC unit that's 18 years old. Even if it kicked on during the inspection, they're looking at the replacement cost and factoring it into their offer. Now, I'm not saying you need to replace your HVAC before you sell, but you should have it serviced, have it cleaned, have a technician document that it's functioning properly, and replace the filter. That documentation matters. And if your system is truly on its last legs, sometimes replacing it proactively gives you better control over the conversation than letting buyers use it as a hammer. Plumbing problems are next, and the one that causes the most damage during inspections is not what most people think. It's not a leaky faucet. It's water damage. When an inspector finds evidence of water intrusion under sinks, behind toilets, in the ceiling below a second-floor bathroom, or in a crawl space, they start asking questions about mold, rot, and how long the problem has been going on. A dripping supply line under a bathroom vanity that's been ignored for 2 years doesn't just cause a small water stain. It causes wood rot, potential mold growth, and a disclosure nightmare. Walk through your house before listing it. Check under every sink. Check around the base of every toilet. Look at the caulking around tubs and showers. Look at the ceiling directly below every bathroom on the second floor. These are things you can actually see and address before an inspector does. Now let's talk about water in places it absolutely should not be. Wet basements and crawl spaces are deal killers at an alarming rate. And I get it. You've lived with a little seasonal water in the basement for years, and it never seemed like a big deal. But a buyer sees standing water, efflorescence on the walls, that white, chalky mineral deposit left by repeated moisture intrusion, stained floor joists in a crawl space, or that musty smell that screams something is wet down here. And they immediately start picturing thousands of dollars in waterproofing, sump pumps, and mold remediation. Some of them aren't wrong. This is one of those areas where getting a waterproofing company in before you list, understanding what the actual fix looks like and what it costs, and then either doing the work or pricing it honestly in your listing is the only smart play. Hiding it is not an option because inspectors will find it. This is where people mess up more than almost anywhere else. Attic insulation and ventilation. It sounds boring. Nobody gets excited about attic ventilation. But inspectors flag it constantly, and here's why it matters. Poor attic ventilation causes heat and moisture to build up in the attic space, which does two things. It destroys your shingles from the inside out, which shortens roof life significantly, and it can lead to mold growth on the roof sheathing, which is the plywood decking under your shingles. When a buyer's inspector finds active mold in the attic, that's not a small item on a punch list. That's a remediation conversation. And remediation costs vary enormously depending on severity. Check your attic before you list. Look at your ridge vents and soffit vents. Make sure they're not blocked by insulation. If there's any discoloration on the sheathing, get it evaluated. Can we please talk about permits for a minute? Because this one drives me absolutely nuts. Sellers will build a deck, finish a basement, add a bathroom, enclose a garage, or put on an addition without pulling permits. Sometimes They did the work themselves. Sometimes they hired a contractor who suggested skipping permits to save money. And for years, nobody said anything. Then the home goes under contract, the inspector asks about permits, and now you've got unpermitted work that either needs to be retroactively permitted, which means inspections, and potentially opening walls to prove compliance with code, or disclosed to the buyer as a known issue, which immediately invites a price reduction or a walk. Some municipalities require sellers to disclose unpermitted work, and in some cases, unpermitted additions can affect the square footage listed on the MLS, which can affect appraisal value. This is not something to wing. If you've got unpermitted work, talk to a real estate attorney and a local building department before you list so you know exactly what you're dealing with. Here's a pro tip that most sellers overlook. Check your smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors before the inspection. This seems so small compared to everything else we've talked about, but inspectors are required to note whether detectors are present, functional, and properly located. Missing CO detectors in homes with gas appliances or attached garages, dead batteries in smoke detectors, missing detectors near sleeping areas, these things show up in the report, and they flag you as someone who didn't maintain the basics. Buyers and their agents notice. And while it might not kill the deal on its own, it contributes to that overall impression that the house hasn't been looked after. A pack of smoke detectors and a couple of CO detectors from the hardware store costs you under $100. Do it before the inspection. Don't give the inspector easy material. Last one, and I'm saving it for last because it's the one that's hardest to fix and easiest to have prevented. Deferred maintenance that piled up everywhere. Look, one cracked caulk joint is not a problem. One stiff door is not a problem. One missing downspout extension is not a problem. But when the inspector is walking through a house and he's finding cracked caulk in 3 bathrooms, sticking doors throughout the house, gutters pulling away from the fascia, peeling paint on exterior trim, a garage door that doesn't auto-reverse properly, a missing cover plate on an electrical outlet, weather stripping that's completely shot on the front door, and grading that slopes toward the foundation. All of those small things together paint a picture. They tell the buyer that this house has been neglected. And once a buyer believes a house has been neglected, they start wondering what else has been neglected that they can't see. Every small deficiency on its own is minor. Together, they build a narrative that costs you money. The fix is exactly what it sounds like. Spend a weekend walking through your house with a notepad and a critical eye before you call a listing agent. Fix the small stuff yourself. Hire a handyman for the things you can't do. Spend a few $100s getting the obvious maintenance items handled, because every deferred maintenance item that shows up in that inspection report is going to cost you more than it would have cost to fix it when the buyer uses it as leverage. Here's the thing about home sale inspections that sellers need to understand. The buyer isn't just trying to find problems. They're trying to build confidence or lose it. A house that inspects cleanly or close to it signals to a buyer that the seller took care of the property. It confirms the price they agreed to. It moves the deal toward closing without drama. A house that comes back with a long inspection report full of deferred maintenance, safety issues, and aging systems does the opposite. It creates doubt, and doubt costs money. Tell me in the comments which one of these you were sitting on, because I bet at least 2 or 3 of these things are somewhere in your house right now, and now you know exactly what to do about them. A good home sale doesn't happen by accident. It happens because someone paid attention to the right things before the inspector showed up. Do the work on your terms. Fix it on your budget. Don't let a buyer's contractor be the first person to tell you what's wrong with your house. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's getting ready to list their home. I'll catch you in the next one.